Hey guys, I'm Mark.
I'm Alon.
And welcome to another episode of The Next Man Up. Hey men, welcome back for another episode of the Next Man Up podcast. I am Mark Stanford. So glad to have you with us because we believe that you as a dad, as a father figure, are on the front lines of raising up the next generation of men. And when boys become healthy and godly men, everyone benefits. I'm excited once again to bring you part 2 of our conversation with Mike Clouse, and we will get to that in just a minute. However, before we do, I thought I would give you a challenge at the beginning of the episode. As you're listening to the rest of Mike's story and the work that he does around identity and how we as men in particular show up in situations as a reaction to our understanding, our belief of who we are, I wonder if you'd be willing to ask yourself some challenging questions. Questions like, did I react in that moment because I felt insecure about who I was as a dad? Or did I lash out against my family because I felt like I was not being respected? And as a dad or as a husband, I need to be respected. Or maybe you can think of a time where you retreated and you were unwilling because of some sense of insecurity to put yourself out there in a work context, in a home context, in a relationship where you held back because you were feeling insecure. Would you challenge yourself as you're listening to this episode to be open and willing to ask some difficult questions? Where in my life am I demonstrating some of the things that Mike is talking about? If you're willing to do that, those acts of courage and bravery in self-reflection, then this episode becomes more than just interesting content. It becomes potentially transformative. So there's my challenge to you as we dig into what Mike's got to say and listen to the remainder of this conversation. So let's get to it. Here is part 2 of my great conversation with my friend and colleague, Mike Clouse. So you've mentioned power up a couple times. I was playing back on your language. I know from your story, and about the time we met, you were in this pivot yet, even inside of your coaching space. You were in this pivot, and you were really drawn into a framework or into a maybe a modality or I'm not sure what the right word is, but you were really drawn into something that allowed your coaching to take a lot more focus and specific shape. And yes. The reasons why I'm bringing it up will become evident as we get into this. But talk about that transition and what it was for you.
Yeah. I had been coaching for, I think, at least a year, maybe, when we had connected, or I was approaching that, maybe 6 months to a year. And I'd been coaching long enough to know I really loved helping people discover purpose and meaning in what they're doing and then live that out. Right. So I thought, hey, that's what I'm going to do.
Yeah.
And then I get out on my own and I realize, you know what? That's really hard to sell. People love it. But if you don't have like a lockstep, people are looking for something much more structured, right? They don't want to,
a little more tangible.
It's hard to sell, a little more tangible. Yeah. They don't want something that seems more nebulous. So it was really hard to communicate that. It was really hard to sell that. And then, everybody I'm talking to is like, you really need to find your niche when it comes to coaching. My fear was that with a niche, I would rule out people wouldn't come to me that I really could support. Right. Because if I was too narrow in my niche, I thought, and then what people were telling me, other people that have been doing it, they're like, no, the niche makes you referable. The niche makes you someone that people, oh, that's what you do. And then they're like, you'll be amazed at how many people say, well, I know this is the kind of coaching you do, but can you do this also? Right. So they were trying to explain to me it doesn't pigeonhole you. It actually helps you get started, get moving, get a foothold. And start connecting with the people you can really serve. So in light of all that, I hired a coach in November of 2017. Yes, because I started on my own in 2017, November 2017, I hired my own coach. and with the purpose of helping me figure out what kind of coach am I? What is my niche? Where do I want to be? And Chris McAllister, Site Shift, as I was walking through that program, just the awareness, the impact that it had on me. I was about 6 weeks into that. And I was like, Chris, this is it. Like, this is the work. This brings all the work that I love doing with people. It puts it in, it gives it a framework. It gives it language to make it something that we can really talk about together. It's like, this is what I want to do. And it was 6 weeks into the program. It wasn't right off the bat, but it was about the sixth week that I told him, I looked at him, I said, this is it. And I just knew.
So what was it, Mike? What was it that clicked for you? Because I think I know you enough to know it was more than just what you can give to your clients. It was what it was doing in you that made a significant impact too.
You're so right. It was the fact that so much of what I was struggling with, not just with my coaching, but just in so many, and really in all areas of life, so many of the things that were holding me back, that were getting in my way, was this concept, this idea of identity. It was all about identity and true identity. This concept, this truth, may I be so bold, this truth that everything we experience every day, every moment, everything we experience, we process through our identity, who we think we are, our perception of who we are, and how for most of us that perception is off. That we have this false narrative that plays in our head because of things like we talked about at the beginning of the podcast, experiences I've had growing up, right? The experiences I had that I was translating and got me into this mode of thinking I had to be a people pleaser. So now this whole people pleaser thing that I didn't even realize was there, it's still there in me. So everything from the type of coaching niche I went into to what I wanted to do on the weekends, or a big question where I had to decide either or for someone, that was all affected by this identity, this false narrative I had in my head that my worth, my value depended on whether or not I pleased them with my response, with my action, with my whatever, right? And that if I could recognize that, if I could start recognizing what that false narrative was that I had in my head about who I am, and start recognizing more about who I truly am, who am I apart from all these other things, apart from everything I do, apart from my relationships with other people. If I could learn more and more about who I am, the more that would actually free me up to be me in all these situations, to no longer be held up by having to do what will make people happy, but instead doing what I felt was right or best.
So Mike, for the guy that's listening to that and is maybe waking up to an awareness for the very first time that I think Mike is describing me, what were the symptoms that were showing up for you as a people pleaser, part one, and then while you're thinking about that, part two is how is it limiting you, or how is it not beneficial to you living in that space versus the space that you're living in today?
Oh man, Coach, good questions, Coach. Man, symptoms. So symptoms being, I can see them better in hindsight.
Sure.
Being on this side now, looking back, symptoms being in a professional situation where I had some really strong thoughts and feelings that weren't all emotional. Like there was some real grit and substance tied to them, but feared bringing them up because of what others I knew, not just thought, what I knew some others in the room would think. And if I, again, that fear of if what I say upsets them and doesn't please them, it makes them think this of me, my worth and value goes down. So symptoms being, I would just withdraw. I'd set back. Found out from a wonderful leader, another leader of mine, Andrea Dowding, and I could list lots and lots of leaders. Andrea Dowding and another one, Brenda Murdoch, were leaders of mine at a company I worked at. at different points, they both leaned into me and said, Mike, we got to know what's going on in that head of yours. You have got to let us know what you're thinking. And if you need help doing that, let me know. I can help you. And that was before connecting with Chris, right? That's before I had done this work. So looking back on this side of it, I can see that a symptom before I was even aware of this was just being way too quiet in moments where I did need to share. Flip side, moments where I'd let that kind of energy, that emotion about something I'm not sharing or keeping down bottled up so long that when it did come out, eruption that was not controlled. and people were harmed. People were harmed by the shrapnel.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So those were some symptoms, right? Just withdrawing, powering up. That powering up happened again, which then results in physical symptoms: being tired, being exhausted, being withdrawn. It resulted in some depression and some anxiety. It's amazing how much of, I'm not going to say that because I know a lot of people will suffer from depression for chemical means, right? So I don't want to say all depression or all anxiety is based on this. But for me, a big part of the depression and anxiety I was feeling was connected to this whole idea around identity and where I was placing my identity. I was building my identity around things that could be gained or lost.
Yeah.
And that's not the way it's supposed to be.
So when you think of identity today, it is something that is there that can't be gained or lost. It's not tied to title or role or position or acquisition, right? It's right. Like that intrinsic value that is unimpacted by all the other circumstances that are around.
Right. It's unimpacted by those things, yet our perception is that it is impacted. That's kind of the difference, our perception. So just an example for maybe a little bit of an illustration. I had a really, really rough professional experience in which I failed. I fell short of what I was expected to do. Responsibility on both sides, but I own my responsibility in that I fell short. Some of those same fears or some of those same things I talked about before kept me from speaking up and saying, this is what I need. And because I didn't speak up and say, this is what I need, they didn't know what to provide me. Right. They didn't know what to provide me. And so I fell short, and I fell short in a way that damaged some relationships. And in that moment, that there's always going to be pain in those moments. And that pain gripped me. And some of the depression started setting in. Right. And thank the Lord above that it all happened in this time that I was working through this site shift coaching with Chris. So as it was happening, all of this was unfolding for me around identity and what happens when we build our identity upon those things, those external things that can be lost or gained. And it was one of these moments where eventually, not in one quick moment, but again, a short season where I was able to step back and look at it. I was able to look at it more from a learning standpoint rather than a judging standpoint, and say, all right, here's the lessons I've learned. When I need something, I have to speak up. It may not be received the way I hope it is, but it'll be received much better then than it would be way down the road.
Back to courage.
Right? Back to courage. More courage to step up in that moment, right? And to do the thing we're avoiding, even though we know it's probably what's best. Yeah. Right. So you're exactly right. Back to courage. And I was able to say, and you know what, this isn't all my fault. There's responsibility on both sides, whether it's, taken or not, there's responsibility on both sides, but I can definitely own mine. And if I would have done my side better, chances are they would have done their side better as well. And even if things never repair there, I'm still me. I am no different than I was before that. The only thing that's different is my perception of myself right now. Yep. That's the only thing that's really different. I am still me. I still have the same passions, the same joys, the same ups, the same downs. And even if those all weren't the same, right? I'm still me. That does not change.
I've heard some people say it like this: you are not your thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
You are not your feelings. You are not
Mm-hmm.
your circumstances. And that's
Mm-hmm.
not to say that they don't impact us and influence us and help build character or
Right.
create some suffering or challenge or joy. It's just
Right.
when you separate yourself, your true self, from the thought, the feeling, the circumstance, the relationship, the title, what's left is that identity. And,
Mm-hmm.
I love how you say it, as a fellow believer who's down with JC,
That's right.
that is really where we find our core, right? Where we find our root and our authentic identity in him that can never be taken away, regardless of what we're experiencing.
Amen.
It cannot be taken away.
Amen. Amen. And that was the other amazing thing about going through this with Chris is I soon learned after getting into it with him and talking about this is so impactful. He's like, well, you know where it comes from, don't you? Where? It comes from the gospel.
Yeah.
Like this example around identity is the example Christ gave us. It's the example of him as he was baptized by John the Baptist. God was audibly heard saying, this is my son whom I love. In him I am well pleased.
Yep.
Jesus hadn't even started his ministry
That's
yet.
right. That's right.
Hadn't even done a thing to earn that worthy, that value, that love and appreciation. His father loved him for who he was.
That's right.
Right. So, and I could go on and on about that story, but I mean, that's at the crux of it, that the example we're given by the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit, who descended on him like a dove in that moment, confirming Jesus in his identity, completely apart from any kind of mission or any kind of community or relationship.
Yep.
And then from there, Christ went on to live out his mission and to build community in a healthy way because it was an overflow of his true identity, not one that was built on unstable things.
Yeah. I like to think of that story also in the context of father passing to son the mantle of manhood, and
so well said.
God,
Yes.
God did not have to do that, but it was a very visible display. And so when you think about Jesus as the man, the human there, to hear the words of heavenly spiritual father to say, I like to, this is Mark's paraphrase, that's my boy, and I'm proud of him. It's like, because that's the language that I would use. So if God were to say that to me, that's what I would want to hear. But when I read those words, that's what I hear. That's my boy, and I'm proud of him. And to your point, he hadn't done anything Jesus-y to that point. Right?
Right.
He was just a typical Palestinian male.
Yeah. He might have been teaching in the synagogues at age 13, right? But
right.
But right, he was just a boy. He was a boy growing up.
Yeah.
He was a boy growing up. Yep.
So I was reading this morning in the Gospels, in Matthew, and Jesus starting the famous Sermon on the Mount, which covers 3 different chapters. And I was reading in the Message version. And you know how scripture is like this, right? You can read things and over and over and over, and then one day it just clicks. So I read through the Beatitudes, and there are 2. You may not recognize them as I read them out of the Message translation, but you will get it. So verse 5, Matthew 5, verse 5 says, "You're blessed when you're content with just who you are, no more, no less. That's the moment you find yourselves proud owners of everything that can't be bought." Thinking about this conversation today and getting into identity, that verse just leapt off the page to me in that translation. Now, you know it as "blessed are the meek," but the way Eugene Peterson says is "blessed are those who are content with who they are, no more, no less." Like, man, it was a God moment. Like the spotlight just came down on that verse. The other one, verse 8, is you're blessed when you get your inside world, your mind and your heart put right. Then you can see God in the outside world. Now you've heard that as pure in heart, but when the message translated as get your mind and your heart right on the inside, then you can see God at work and in play on the outside. Again, it was like both of these were bolded and highlighted and just hovering above the page as I read it, anticipating this conversation today.
Mm-hmm. I love that you bring up the message, because I've started reading multiple and comparing multiple versions when I read scripture. And the message has become one of my favorite because of just things like that, right? Just breaking it out more. And so on track, so on track with exactly what you're talking about with identity.
Yeah, that's right.
Right? To be content with just who you are and, not looking for it elsewhere. Not looking for it elsewhere.
So think about identity, Mike, from the standpoint of men and the struggles that men have, and then also as a father trying to raise up that boy and guide him into manhood. How does identity work, even for those that are not coach trained and haven't done the sight shift program? How does this identity work really help dads and their by default help sons in that upbringing process?
Yeah, another great question. What comes to mind right off the bat is one of the biggest elements in this whole thought of identity and how to recognize when this whole sense and this clash or confrontation between true identity and the false identity and insecurity come together is, as a father, I know it's happening when I am, and not to abuse a word, it helps me be a better father if I'm totally in tune and am present with present in the moment with my emotions. And if I can pay attention to my emotions and recognize, all right, I'm about ready to just walk away from this and go hide somewhere and hope it disappears. I'm hiding. Or if I can feel the energy starting in my feet and start to rise up and I'm about ready to just get mad and explode, it's what we call proving. And if I can pay attention to more of just my emotional well-being in all these moments as a husband, as a father, and start working on catching those moments, hopefully before they happen, but even if it's before they happen, even if it's while or after, recognize that those are moments in which something about my identity was being tweaked, was being stress was being put on it. Maybe a better way to illustrate it is the moment I talked about with my boys. They were arguing and they wouldn't stop arguing. And so my intention was to walk out there and just stop it. So I thought I was going to say something and just stop their conversation. And when I said something and they talked back, that powered me up, right? That powered me back up.
Because why? Like, take us through that moment.
Yes,
what were you thinking or feeling there?
Yep. It powers me up because here's what's going on in my head that before working with Chris, I didn't realize was an identity issue is they don't respect me as a father. They're talking back. I'm not enough. For me, it's I'm not being enough in this moment to squelch it and get the response I want.
Okay, so stop there for a second. So if your boys had stopped, dropped, and rolled, to borrow a fun phrase from elementary school,
Right.
you would have felt like in that moment, well, I'm the man because
I'm the man.
I spoke and they responded and I got what I wanted.
You got it.
And because that didn't happen, then you're like, oh, I have to prove myself in this situation and put my foot down.
I've got to put my foot down, raise my voice, look them in the eye. And don't get me wrong, there are times where kids need a little bit of stern correction, right? But it needs to be fought out. It needs to,
not an emotional eruption,
not an emotional response,
yeah.
Not an emotional eruption. And we're going to have emotional eruptions, right? We're not perfect. Again, my dad showed that to me and apologizing to me when it happened. But the more we can be aware of our emotions in the moment, the more we can hopefully start catching those moments and recognize, yes, this is irritating. They need to learn, and I need to be a good teacher of it. So one of the best ways I can be a teacher of it is to role model it. The silly thing is in that moment, I wanted them to stop yelling at each other and start talking to each other. So how did I handle it? Right?
Yep.
I raised my voice. I was not modeling. I did not start with modeling what I wanted them to do. Because my identity was threatened, because I didn't feel like I was enough, because my first comment wasn't enough. And I needed to power up and prove myself. Yeah.
So thank you for your vulnerability and courage and sharing that story. It makes me think of something that just happened in my house the other day. I was on the case of my middle guy, he's a senior in high school, and I know I'm on the clock. You know, we're in the fourth quarter and coming down. And so I was strongly encouraging him to act or behave in a certain way around an issue. I don't even remember what the issue was, but I was on him. And it just didn't feel good. And my wife and my daughter were in the room, and they could sense a bit of the tension. And I wasn't powering up per se. I was calm, and I wasn't yelling, or I didn't even raise my voice, but I was approaching it in a not so healthy way. And so I left that room, came out to my office, and just paused for a moment. And I'm like, okay, what was I feeling in that moment? And the conclusion I came to, Mike, is what I was feeling had nothing to do with what we were talking about. It had everything to do with I'm saying goodbye to this kid over a period of time. I'm grieving the fact that he's growing up, and I don't spend as much time with him as I used to, and I miss that. And so I sent him a quick text, and I'm like, dude, I'm sorry. This is what was going on in me at the time. And it had nothing to do with what we were talking about. It had everything to do with me not handling your spreading your wings and flying the coop very well. I just wasn't handling it. And, last year, 2 years ago, 4 years ago, certainly 10 years ago, I wouldn't have been able to do that. I might have recognized, I pushed him too hard. I should apologize. And I've always been open in apologizing, even if it's well after the fact. That has been a standard approach in my parenting. But it's only been recent that I've been able to really step back and assess, what am I feeling, and where is that feeling coming from? Because the feeling is a signal, and if I pay attention to this signal, it will help me know how to be better, or what I'm struggling with. And it was plain as day as I was sitting there thinking about it, but nobody else would have known that. They just see dad's picking on this issue.
Right. Huge kudos to you, to step back and give yourself the space to kind of deconstruct that moment. Yeah. Right. And to get underneath those feelings. And that's the cool thing about this, is even though you and I have training in some exploration and digging, really the key factor is giving yourself the space to sit down and think about it.
That's right.
You don't have to be trained as a coach or anything like that, to just, as men, if we would take the time to just push pause, go sit down and think about it and say, be honest. We don't even have to be honest necessarily out loud all the time with someone else. It helps. It really helps to process out loud. But even just to take the time to sit down and say, what was I feeling? Why was I feeling that way? What's really going on right here? Man, the wisdom and just the healthy processing and the healthy actions, responses, and stuff that it creates with our families and all of our friendships, relationships, personal, professional, could be huge.
That's right.
Could be huge. So kudos to you. That's absolutely fantastic.
Well, and not to toot my own horn here, but that type of action or work is the braver, more courageous work.
It is.
For you to go back to your boys and say, hey, I'm sorry, this is not how I wanted to show up, right? To reflect on what you're feeling and to be uncomfortable instead of ignoring it or just wanting it to go away, or even just the sorry about that, kid, that's a step, but there's more that could be explored there if you're willing to be open and be brave about it.
Yeah. And as men, we're not taught, we're directly, indirectly, we're taught that feelings, aren't necessarily they're kind of a taboo thing.
That's right.
To talk about. Now, I believe in this day and age, in this season, it's coming out a lot more, and it's becoming a lot more accepted. And it's amazing to see how hungry guys are for it when they actually find a place and a space they can.
That's right.
Right. But there's still this work we've got to do in terms of getting over this fear of really recognizing and owning and talking about our feelings.
Yeah. So that's a great segue to do you have any suggestions for guys, like the guy that's given us 60 minutes to hear your story and is like, you know what, I want to be better here, but how can I do that? Do you have any suggestions or resources for that guy that's out there listening that's like that?
Yeah. There's the book that we coach through is called Figure That Shift Out. SHI. F as in Frank.
Yes.
Shift. F as in Frank T. It's out on Amazon. If you want the full length, it's an easy read. It's a short read, and it's the high level principles. And again, it's called Figure That Shift Out by Chris McAllister. Chris is right here in the Columbus area. And there's a full version, the original version of this, that includes the scripture that's from the very beginning, as Chris kind of lays out this whole thing about identity, mission, community. It's called Sight Shift Identity. Sight Shift is all one word, SIGHT, identity. And it's a little more, it's still a good read, easy read, but it actually includes the scripture and biblical principle that this is built on. Both are great reads to get into this, just as a resource to have in hand. Really, a lot of it is, do you have, and if you don't, where can you find a buddy that you can actually sit down and talk about some of these things with? I know that's easier said than done. But know that if you're looking for that, you look for that. You're not the only one.
Yeah,
there are other guys out there looking for it. It's finding the courage to ask about that stuff. Connect with and get with guys like Mark and I. I mean, these are the kind of conversations that Mark and I have every day with individuals and professionals. It's what we love doing as coaches, to just help people process through this. And it's more than just about, what we're talking about is more than just feeling better. Mm-hmm. When you work on this stuff, it's about becoming a better leader of self, which a natural overflow of becoming a better leader of self is becoming a better leader of others.
That's
a more effective leader of others, a more humble, servant leader of others. And it's amazing how much more powerful that leadership is. Right. So what we're talking about isn't just a feeling thing. It takes a lot of hard work. You got to roll up your sleeves. You got to get dirty, start ordering your internal world intentionally, so that you can lead your external world more effectively, with more joy, more effectiveness, and so forth. So
that's great.
Are there anything else, like any other thoughts you have around some resources? Again, guys like Mark and I, a good buddy, books like I mentioned, and there are other books out there too. Those are just the two that I'm most, because it's what I study and it's what I teach.
Yeah. No, that's great. That's exactly what I was hoping you'd be able to share, is like, this is what's impacted me, and would love for others to be able to take advantage of resources like that. Yeah. Yeah.
There is one more book that just came to mind, Mark, and I'm pretty sure you're the one that suggested it to me. Now that I think about it, but it was Change Your Questions, Change Your Life.
Yeah. Yep.
Another great book that's simply about, and it's both personal and professional, and it's simply about asking better questions. And it's amazing how just focusing on asking better questions can help you do all of this stuff we're talking about right now. It can help you step outside of that whole identity struggle and start looking to understand things before you dive in, which again just helps with all this awareness.
That's right. That's right. So, Mike, if there's a guy out there that's listening to this and is like, boy, I would really like to talk to Mike about this, or connect with Mike offline and maybe share some thoughts further, or whatever, what's a good way for our listeners to be able to connect with you?
Most certainly, and would love to hear from you. My direct email, which would probably be the easiest, is just simply Mike, Mike, at Coach Clouse, and that's CLOU, S as in Sam, E as in every.com. So it's Mike at CoachClouse.com. Another great place is to find me on Facebook.
Okay.
So www.facebook.com/life-purpose-impact. Those are the two best ways to get in touch with me.
Got it. And I'll put those in our show description or show notes, so that listeners can have access to that as well.
Very good.
Dude, thank you for showing up today and for being courageous and vulnerable and telling your story as a professional and also as a dad. I knew this was going to be a good conversation, and for all of the reasons that you just shared, you proved it to be right. So appreciate you, and I appreciate the friendship that we have as well.
Likewise.
And
likewise. Again,
for the opportunity for you to be on the show and impact dads and their sons, and as a result, really the world in a positive way. So thank you, brother.
Likewise, appreciate you more than you know, and just humbled with the opportunity to share my story. And my prayer is that God use it however He wishes to hopefully do His work.
That's right.
In somebody's life. So thank you very much.
All right, listeners, that's all for today. Thank you for being with us. If you have any comments or questions, you can hit Mike up directly, or you can get us at our email, feedback@thenextmanup.com. All right, until next time, thanks for being with us. Adios. Hey, listeners, thanks for journeying with us on this Next Man Up podcast. We would love to hear from you. Maybe you have a question or an idea, perhaps a topic for us to consider. If that's you and you want to reach out to us, you can get us at feedback@thenextmanup.com. That's feedback@thenextmanup.com. Again, we'd love to hear from you. Until next time, we'll see you later.